Hello, and welcome to an evening of poetry with Gabrielle Bates, Laura Reed, and the current U.S. Poet Laureate, Ada Limón. This is one of 3 headlining events for the 25th anniversary of the Get Lit Festival. I'm Kate Peterson, Director of Get Lit, and I would like to thank all of you for being here tonight. Another round of applause for all of you for joining us. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that Eastern Washington University and Get Lit reside within the traditional homelands of the Spokane people and other tribes who are connected through their shared history of this region. As a festival that celebrates stories, we want to recognize the story of this land and the indigenous people, plants, and animals who began writing it long before we did. So you are here supporting the Get Lit Festival. Get Lit is a nonprofit organization housed within Eastern Washington University. And each year we present a dynamic and diverse lineup of over 40 events, this year featuring over 80 authors from our region and beyond. The festival's mission, thank you. The festival's mission is to inspire creativity, celebrate diversity, and showcase the power of the written word. Building the festival and our budget from the ground up each year is a really big undertaking, as you can imagine. So there are some folks that I would like to thank tonight for helping us get here. First, I would like to thank Assistant Coordinator Elizabeth Graves, who is a graduate student studying poetry at Eastern. Liz works really hard. Give her a round of applause. I would also like to thank all of the interns who've helped build the festival for us this year and who are helping alongside many volunteers from Eastern and the community. The festival, like I mentioned, has been around now for 25 years. So I would like to take a moment to just thank Christopher Howell and Christine Holbert, who are 2 of the original founders of the festival. Their vision was to create a space to celebrate our region's talented writers and to give our local community access to some of the most brilliant writers from around the country. They wanted to create a literary vortex here in Spokane, and I believe they succeeded. So can we give them a round of applause? So the festival, like I mentioned, has been around for 25 years, so that is a lot of volunteer efforts from students working hard, from volunteers working hard to bring this festival to Spokane. I'm sure there are a lot of you in the crowd tonight who have been part of Get Lit in some way since its founding. That includes authors, local artists, interns, volunteers, and previous festival directors. I would like to thank you all. A nonprofit literary festival housed within a state university surviving 25 years is a big feat. And it's thanks to our community that we've reached this milestone. And not only did we reach it, but we are hosting the nation's Poet Laureate, everyone. So big round of applause for us. So you can learn more about all of our sponsors and partners on our website, but I would like to give a special thank you to the Washington State Arts Commission for their critical grant funding, for Eastern Washington University's foundation, who helped us provide many free tickets to students this year, and also to Eastern's College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences for their support. One final reminder before we get to tonight's readings, there is a QR code on your festival program, which will bring you to our post-event survey. Participation in that survey helps us obtain critical grant funding, so please take a moment at some point during the festival to complete one of those surveys. Okay, so the moment has arrived. We are here to celebrate the work of 3 extremely talented poets, Gabrielle Bates, Laura Reed, and Ada Limón. We are honored to be celebrating 3 women who are at such exciting points in their careers as poets. Gabrielle Bates has just published her debut collection with Tin House, and it was met with much worthy praise. Laura Reed's 4th collection recently won the Juniper Prize, and we are all so thrilled for her here in Spokane. Yes, and of course, as longtime fans of Ada Limón, we were thrilled with her recent and well-deserved appointment as U.S. Poet Laureate. It is important for us to celebrate poetry tonight because of how it can bring us all together and show us our humanity. It helps us find meaning and connection, celebrate beauty and joy, but also to stare ugliness in the face, because that is also critical. We do need to look at the darkness in order to find the light. So we are thrilled to illuminate these three talented poets on the stage tonight. Gabrielle, Laura, and Ada will begin by sharing some of their poetry with us, and then they will sit down together for a conversation, which will be led by Gabrielle Bates, who is tonight's first reader. Gabrielle Bates is the author of the poetry collection Judas Goat, which was published by Tin House in 2023. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, Plowshares, APR, and Best American Experimental Writing, among other journals and anthologies. Originally from Birmingham, Alabama, she currently lives in Seattle, where she works for Open Books, a poem emporium, and with Luther Hughes and Duji Tahat, co-hosts the podcast, The Poet Salon. Please give a warm welcome to Gabrielle Bates.
Thank you. To say it is an honor to read tonight with Laura and Ada feels like the understatement of a lifetime. I feel lucky as hell to be here. And I'm just so grateful not only to get to read with these incredible poets, but to get to be in conversation with them afterwards as well. This is a total dream for me. I'm going to be reading tonight from Judas Goat, my first book. I worked on this book for about 10 years. It's a very haunted book. It's haunted by a lot of things: the Deep South, where I was born and raised, violences of various kinds, and the risks inherent to being in relationship with humans and other animals. Throughout my 20s, I was reckoning a lot with ways I'd been taught and trained, trying to break free of certain silences. This first poem is called The Mentor. He carved faces into the dead parts of cedars. He wore a belt of chisels around his waist. To determine where they were dead, he took a leafless limb, followed it like thread back to its spool, down the corresponding strip of trunk. In the middle of those woods, where the ground sloped into a large bowl, mist often got trapped, parted at our calves. We walked together for a long time, and as we walked, he traced what I said back to my left breast, down to the tender hole where I was once attached to my mother, until I went silent. Then he braced my back against a tree. He took out a chisel and kneeled. You ask when I stopped shouting everything and started keeping language close to my mouth, as if I were reading to a match that had to last my life. Well, it was not that day. That was much later, after the trees had all been cleared and the earth leveled. When I stopped begging to be believed and started telling the truth, no man was there. This next poem is a kind of hometown portrait poem inspired by Birmingham, Alabama, and specifically the neighborhood of Homewood, which is where I went to high school. It's called Strawberries. A car's tires thunk over the rubbery black tripwire at the oil change, triggering a fat bell, and a group of girls in silver leotards are reflected like spatters of sap in its windows, liquidine, firm, gleaming. It's a game day. They are the girls chosen to split in tempo to the brass band, heel of a front foot sliding over astroturf, top of a back foot grinding over lit green, cervix slapping the 50-yard line like a fried egg flipped down on a griddle to burn. Behind the bleachers, a boy takes off the shirt of another boy, paints a letter there in red paint, R, and then another boy, I, O, T. When the sun goes down over the ridge, all the painted boys will make patriots. For now, the sun rises, sanctioning the street. Jiffy Lube, pet store, the Sam's super sandwiches teens file into, practicing the joke of language. The morning is cool on the outside and hot in the restaurant. The war in the words, playful as a war can be, meaning each gut bleeds out like a slit pig's, filling the cracks in linoleum, spilling over, becoming smooth. The layers of red dry and build on one another, and for years, the gap between ceiling and floor lessens. Backs hunch as the mind saws downward, revealing rings. In the parking lot, "Are you asleep?" says the boy who is not my boyfriend, running his fingers along the band of my underwear. Across the street from this, for years, an ancient tortoise roams the floor of the pet store, closing his army green beak around the red toenails of sandaled women, thinking them strawberries. I feel ashamed for all the moments I've been kind, knowing kindness is all it would take. I was thinking and feeling through a lot of questions about mothers and mothering when I was writing this book. What is a mother? What does it mean to mother? And there are also a few poems in this book that I think of as pre-elegies. So elegies for a figure who, in the world of the poem, has not yet died. This next poem exists in those intersections. Salmon. My father and I sit at a sushi bar in my new city, sampling 3 different kinds of salmon nigiri. He tells me about a great funeral speech he recently heard a son give for his father. The speech was structured around regrets. Everyone assumed the father didn't have, interspersed with hilarious stories involving boys crashing the family van and fishing mishaps. The ivory salmon is pale and impossibly soft. the sliver of steelhead, orange enough to pretend it's salmon. How else to say it? I am my father's only child, and he is my mother. We dip our chopsticks into a horseradish paste dyed green and called wasabi. I know his regrets. I could list them. But instead, at his funeral, I will talk, if I can talk, about nights like this. How good it felt just to be next to him, to be the closest thing he had. For all the harrowing aspects of this book, Judas Goat, at the end of the day, it's really an attempt to honor and choose love, despite all the risks. I'm going to end with a love poem. It includes what might be a fairly obscure reference, if you're not from the Southeast, to the Toomer's Corner Oaks, which were these very old oak trees on the Auburn University campus in Alabama, which a fan of the rival football team poisoned in 2011. I know, it's a bummer. This is called The Lucky Ones. I am warned against marrying early love. I am also told it works out sometimes, for saplings can be braided like hair. Wow, okay, we're back. Let me start that over. The universe said, try that again. Okay. The lucky ones. I am warned against marrying early love. I am also told it works out sometimes, for saplings can be braided like hair. We will bend and grow together, while the centuried oaks at Toomer's Corner hollow, and the college tree poisoner brags on the radio. Your ring on my finger, a single green stone, is alive in the night, in the blue glow of numbers above the stove. In the other present, we are paused on the dorm room couch of our first kiss. You are twisting toward me, and the years that make up the majority of my life feel planets away. A flicker of incredible distance I breathe in, and it's kin to when yesterday the drugs hit, and you stared from my reflection in the mirror to my shirtless body, almost 30, your gaze a too-wide needle stitching in vain. And you explained that I was nowhere, doubled, dispersed. How can I forget how even when you wrapped me in your arms, this did not fix it? And this morning, when I wake to the black hourglass tattooed on your side, still asking you, have I returned? Please, answer me honestly. Only you can see it. Only you can know. Thank you so much.
Laura Reed is the author of But She Is Also Jane, published by University of Massachusetts Press in 2023. Dresses from the Old Country, Instructions for My Mother's Funeral, and the Chewbacca on Hollywood Boulevard Reminds Me of You. She served as Poet Laureate of Spokane from 2015 to 2017 and teaches at Spokane Falls Community College and Eastern Washington University. It is the pleasure of my career to have put such a beloved Spokane poet and someone who I admire so much on this special stage tonight. Please welcome Laura Reed.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. Like Gabby said, it's a great honor to be here and reading with Gabby and Ada. And also, I just want to say I'm grateful that you're all here and also that I can't see you. Okay, so I'm going to start by I'm just going to read my favorite poem from both of my first two books. And the first one it's from Instructions for My Mother's Funeral, and it's called Community College. On Monday and Wednesday nights, I drive 2nd Avenue to Sunset to Government Way, the road curving past the cemeteries. I think of my boss running it, his bald head turning pink and cancerous, of the buck who walked out in front of me, the trees raised to build the new life center, and of Wanda, who will arrive earlier than her teacher, straight from the hospital in her blue smock and white shoes, paragraph ready. She wants me to check each sentence like a stitch in a wound. Will it hold the skin together? I know she has 3 children and no partner to watch them. She does not want to talk. She wants to get home. I don't know she works at the same hospital where I'll go to deliver the baby that grows bigger on my lap each night. I sit next to her and hold my pen over her paper. I don't know I'll lie on a metal stretcher and be wheeled into a room where Wanda will wait next to a tray of scissors. Our eyes will meet and we'll smile, but we won't speak. She'll divide my body with a white sheet so I won't see them cut me. Then she'll stand on the other side, hand the tools to the doctor, watch him open me carefully, the way my mother slits an envelope to neatly pull out the letter. It's Wanda who will be the first person after the doctor to touch my son, the first to bathe him in a basin of water. I will still be on the other side of the sheet, the narcotics banging my head on the table. But Wanda will bring him to me, lower his face so I can see him. Thanks. Okay, so that baby is 23, and he moved to New York this week. And one more small announcement. If anyone knows Wanda, I have been looking for her for 23 years. So I would love to give her that poem. Okay, little change of tone. My second book is called Dresses from the Old Country, and one of my favorite poems in this book is called Flashdance. The year I was 13, I worked in a steel mill by day and as an exotic dancer at night, like all my friends in 8th grade. We were tired, but about to get our big break. Since we were all Jennifer Beals, we wore leg warmers to keep our calves loose, so we'd be always ready to show what we had. We cut the necks out of our sweatshirts so they slid off our shoulders, even though our mothers made us wear shirts underneath. I didn't tell the other Jennifers how I went down to my room in the basement where I moved after my mother remarried and started to have new children and played maniac and tried to run in place as fast as the real Jennifer. So fast you couldn't see the magic. Like those cartoon flip books, each drawing only different by one small move. And then came the song when she shows everyone what's under her welder's mask and overalls, a body that can fly across a wood floor and land in a somersault. I had to pretend the flying part. There wasn't enough room between my bed and the accordion door my new father installed. I lived in a warehouse like Jennifer. I couldn't believe it when she went to dinner at the seafood restaurant with that man and slid her foot into his lap. I thought it must have felt like the lobster she was eating, something I'd never had. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now I'm going to read a few poems from my new book that's called But She Is Also Jane, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'm going to start with a poem called Solving for X. Whether I should say, "You taught me algebra," to the woman I recognize in the YMCA bathroom is a dilemma. That is to say, it is a problem that is not easy to solve. I like the way solve means to break something down, as in dissolve or solvent. I want to tell Mrs. Hicks that I always liked her tightly coiled hair that could not be controlled, and that's how I recognized her, and also that I appreciated how calm she was when explaining a problem that would cause me to panic from knowing so little, or now from having forgotten so much. When I was in her class, I was 14 and had mononucleosis. My teachers agreed that algebra was the only homework I had to do before I went to bed. My mother had a new baby, and he cried like scissors cutting through my sleep, making a shape of it. I used to sew. I used to pin tissue paper patterns to fabric. I used to solve for X. Once, a girl was wearing a white skirt and got her period, and Mrs. Hicks made us all put our heads down like we were playing Heads Up, 7 Up in elementary school so the girl could walk out. I don't want to undress in front of Mrs. Hicks, though I know she doesn't know me. She looks tired and is staring into her empty locker like a mind. I put on my coat and smile as if I am just a random middle-aged woman and she a random older one, and there has never been anything between us, no invisible numbers we were trying to pin down. I don't ask if she remembers the boy I stared at all during her class, who was always getting up to sharpen his pencil as if he just couldn't work in these conditions. Or if she ever thought about how Heads Up, 7 Up is a game that is weirdly based on figuring out who touched you when you were not allowed to look. Thank you. Okay, I'm doing a tone shift again, this one's more serious. This is the title of the book is taken from this poem, and it's called Jane Doe 1 through 9. The president of my college has been accused by 9 Jane Does. Jane Doe is what we call an unidentified body. One Jane says he put his hand on her breast. One Jane says he showed her his penis. One Jane took notes of everything he said and did. Smart girl, he might have said. The road I drive to the college is lined with evergreens. It's not that evergreens don't lose their needles, but that they replace them quickly. My mother's name is Jane. She was an only child, lonely in the woods of childhood. I read mysteries inside that silence, stared at a shaft of light where you could see particles of dust. I couldn't believe I hadn't known they were there. One Jane says, of course she did not come forward. Would we have believed her? One Jane said, don't walk home in the darkness. One Jane said, yes, she had sex with him, but she was afraid for her job. One Jane said he texted her 559 times in one day. One Jane destroyed the records. One Jane taught me how to read, sketch of a girl on an empty page with her brother Dick and their dog Spot. I liked how only some of the page was picture. People can appear from out of nowhere. There's also a younger girl in a red wagon. Jane is pulling her, but she is also Jane. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, the next poem I'm going to read kind of cracks me up that I'm reading it because the poem is really about how difficult it is to tell someone that you were once a cheerleader. And I feel like I am kind of enacting that, like taking the pleasure in telling you that I was once a cheerleader. So it's sort of a meta moment, okay? The pleasure and the pain. It's called The Cheerleader. I'm really good at titles. So the cheerleader. I can't decide if it is something to be ashamed of or proud. It could mean I gave up integrity for affirmation, that I was pretty and popular enough. It could undermine my desire for people in the present to consider me smart, which is insulting to me and other cheerleaders and also to my audience. I had an applique with my name on it and one with a bullpup because that was our mascot. I had a letter sweater like it was the 1950s because I considered letter jackets too bulky and masculine. I had designed myself to be feminine. This was before I understood that gender was a construct and a performance, when I thought it was a ticket to love. I have been asked why I was a cheerleader with a curiosity pretending to contain no judgment. And I said, because I was young, because I liked to dance, because I wanted to fit in, because it was fun to stand on the wall at Albee Stadium and whisper and laugh with the other girls who had been set apart by our blue and white uniforms. I said, don't pretend you don't think it's beneath or above you. You would have liked Fridays too, when we wore our uniforms to school to advertise for the game, so we didn't have to sort through all the other choices of what kind of image we wanted to project like a film, or the slideshows my dad used to make on the dining room wall. Look at me and Tom when we camped in Banff, and he tricked us when we hiked all the way up to the tea house and said he forgot his wallet, but really he had a 20 tucked inside his magic belt. Look at Chris. No one wonders, I guess, why we're looking at so many pictures of him when he was only 2 and very sick and on medication that made his face break out and his eyes and lips always wet from crying. He wore a cute blue sleeper that had once belonged to his brothers, so he didn't look so different. He rode his toddler taxi through the kitchen. Sometimes you can see me in the corner of a picture, coming in and out because I was so much older and already a cheerleader. Sometimes it's even Friday and I'm in my uniform with my name and my bullpup and the promise of the evening hovering in front of me like the horizon. I didn't understand the horizon. Sometimes I would run and run far from the house, trying to get closer to its vibrating light, but this proved impossible, which I guess is science. Maybe you think, what a cheerleader move to not understand the horizon. Or maybe I'm projecting. It's important to put everything up on the wall. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read 2 more, and this next one's a little bit long, and it has a read-in title, so here we go. Marie Curie and the Isotopes, World Tour 1911, is what my new t-shirt that I got for Christmas says under her picture. When I unwrapped it, my son was mysteriously exasperated and asked why I like Marie Curie so much anyway, which oddly I was unprepared to answer. I think I said that winter in Paris when she wore everything she owned to stay warm in her attic room while she nobly studied chemistry for the good of all of us. Or maybe Pierre's head crushed by the wheel of a carriage, leaving her to raise Irene and Eve on her own. Or how she left them alone at night while she went to the laboratory to finish the work she and Pierre had started. Or how she and Irene dragged their X-ray machine onto the fields of World War I to help the soldiers. Or maybe her hands rotting and killing her, or the glowing journal she left in her drawer. I mean, any one of these is a good enough reason. But he was right when he said that I was never good at science. Maybe I shouldn't have worn those flowered skirts and thought only of boys and suffering. Was Marie the antidote, like my own mother, to whom I would not listen? Once someone asked her if she was a poet too, and she said no, with an expression of almost horror. I'm a social scientist. I gave my nephew a Mama Llama book for Christmas, and my mother called to tell me she approves of Mama Llama. Mama Llama doesn't like melodrama. Well, of course she doesn't. The rhyme was inevitable. In the library at St. Aloysius grade school, there was a section of biographies of famous women that included St. Teresa of the Little Flower, Florence Nightingale, Clara Barton, and Marie Curie. I checked them out again as soon as they were due. Marie Curie was the one most famous for her mind. Kindness was what my mother said I had already, and this was clearly disappointing. I think it would help if I had a band, like the Isotopes. I have never heard them, but imagine they are as clever as Bach's two-part inventions, which I always loved playing because you had to tell one hand to do something completely different than the other, not just complementary, but distinct and simultaneous. It is easy to think danger is beautiful when you're not in it, or to love the thing you are discovering when you don't yet know it's killing you. I am discovering something. I can feel it coming closer. Like the new year that is about to begin in this late afternoon darkness, the Christmas lights beaming sadly after their time has passed, which is difficult to determine while it's happening, but you know when it has. I am skating on a pond I could fall through. I wonder if Marie Curie was surprised when she learned that science had deceived her. I know she did not admit that radiation exposure could have had anything to do with her illness and death, which is in keeping with her character, and thus another thing I must admire. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna close with the poem that's actually on page 1 of this new book, but I had to wait till I was brave enough to read it. And it's called R.I.P. Laura's Vagina. Okay. Your vagina is beginning to devitalize, the doctor explained. When I asked him why I had had so many urinary tract infections lately. The first thing I thought was that I should say, no, your vagina is devitalizing. Because I have 2 teenage sons, and that is what passes for wit in our house. But then I got lost in the fact that he didn't, in fact, have a vagina. Then, in the little room inside my mind where Dorothy Parker was holding court at the Algonquin, I thought maybe devitalize is just a medical term. Give the guy a break. But I didn't even know this man. Couldn't he just give me a prescription and say something vague about aging? What about euphemism? I guess devitalize was one because he went on to more vividly explain that my tissues were frankly deteriorating. At that point, I was thinking, but you haven't even seen the area in question, and how did you get this far without knowing how to talk to women? Devitalize reminds me of de-ice, which is what I was doing just before this tricky moment at the urgent care. My son was late to algebra because it's really cold and it took a while to clean the car. And at 8 o'clock, the door where he usually goes in automatically locks. So I had to take him around to the front, and he dropped his phone in the snow and it got run over. So now there's a crack in the screen. He wants me to replace it, but I said, no, it still works. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes. Keep going. Another one. Ada Limón is the author of 6 books of poetry, including The Carrying, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award for Poetry. Her book, Bright Dead Things, was nominated for the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Her work has been supported by a Guggenheim Fellowship. She grew up in Sonoma, California, and now lives in Lexington, Kentucky, where she writes and teaches remotely. Her new book of poetry, The Hurting Kind, is out now with Milkweed Editions. In June of 2022, Librarian of Congress Carla Hayden appointed Ada Limón to be the 24th Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, also known as the U.S. Poet Laureate. The position has existed as part of the Library of Congress for over 80 years and was named by an act of Congress. To find out more about the laureateship, you can visit the library's website. I am beyond thrilled and honored to ask you to please join me in welcoming Ada Limón.
Hello. Hello. How are you?
look at me. Okay, I'm looking. I'm seeing. Do I need a little? Let's see if I can. I think I can see most of you. Just this little front row. Hi. I might have to kind of be separate from you, but then I'll want to lean over. It is such an honor to be here. And I can't even tell you how much I was laughing backstage at Laura's incredible poems. And I have been reading Gabby's work for a while, and it's been such a pleasure to see her success. So it feels just really beautiful to be here with such incredible women. In one of my favorite places, because I have sort of a second family here. My very best friend in the world is from here, Trish Harnato, and the Harnatos are here, and it feels like home in that way. So I'm going to read 8 poems, and I'm going to begin with this poem because it's a reading with all women. How to Triumph Like a Girl. I like the lady horses best, how they make it all look easy. Like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they're ladies. As if this big, dangerous animal is also a part of me. That somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body, there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart. Giant with power, heavy with blood. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge beating genius machine that thinks, no, it knows, it's going to come in first? And then I'm going to read this poem for my best friend Trish. Everything in this poem is true. Someplace like Montana, for Trish. Now, when I go to the grocery store, I am amazed at the wide aisles of bright food and foodstuffs, and it's nothing like the bodega I shopped in for years in Brooklyn between the bars we liked. Once, when I was going for groceries, I ran into T, and we decided we needed to drink rather than shop. And we did. There were a lot of beers on tap, and the taps were all different, like toys in a dentist's toy chest, so I said, I'll have what she's having. And maybe it was snowing out, and it seemed to be at a time when every shirt I bought at the second-hand store would turn out to be see-through. But I wouldn't know it until I was out, so a lot of our conversations would start, is this shirt see-through? And it was. We talked for a long time, grocery bags empty on the chair. We both talked about moving to some place like Montana, and how sometimes it would be nice to see more sky than just this little square between the bridges and buildings. And then we'd miss Brooklyn and each other, and so we ordered another beer. T was writing a play and also some articles, and we both just needed some money and maybe to make out with someone who wasn't an asshole. But also, we wanted to make great art. T was good at naming things, so we decided she should be a titologist. And she liked that, so she agreed. What would we do if we lived in some place like Montana? We'd go for walks and look at trees and write and look at the sky. Yes, and we'd cook, and we'd go to those huge grocery stores that have toy cars attached to the carts so kids can pretend like they're driving. Yes, and we'd probably have kids too. All of this seemed really far off and not like us at all, so we ordered another beer and said, life is long. Now I'm walking around the grocery store in Kentucky, and I've just looked at trees and sky, and I should write something. So I asked T to tell me what to write about, and she says, saturation. And I think of that feeling when you're really full, or life is full, and you can't think of anything else that could fit in it. But then even more sky comes, and more days, and there is so much to remember and swallow. I asked T what I should call the thing I write about saturation, because she's a titologist. And she says, someplace like Montana. Thank you. The next poem I'm going to read is for mothers. And it's particularly for my mother. I had a moment when I think many of us have where we think we've done everything, like, ugh, I've had to survive by myself this whole time. And then you think, no, I haven't. Someone, whoever it was taking care of me. This poem I have, it's not uncommon. I have scoliosis. And so I had to go to a lot of appointments. And again, I thought this was totally my burden. This is the first poem I wrote, I think, from the ending back up. The raincoat. When the doctor suggested surgery and a brace for all my youngest years, my parents scrambled to take me to massage therapy, deep tissue work, osteopathy, and soon my crooked spine unspooled a bit. I could breathe again and move more in a body unclouded by pain. My mom would tell me to sing songs to her the whole 45-minute drive to Middle Two Rock Road and 45 minutes back from physical therapy. She'd say that even my voice sounded unfettered by my spine afterward. So I sang and sang because I thought she liked it. I never asked her what she gave up to drive me or how her day was before this chore. Today, at her age, I was driving myself home from yet another spine appointment, singing along to some maudlin but solid song on the radio. And I saw a mom take her raincoat off and give it to her young daughter when a storm took over the afternoon. My God, I thought, my whole life I've been under her raincoat, thinking it was somehow a marvel that I never got wet. So many of you know that today is Earth Day, and we are the best planet. Not that it's a competition, but we are. And this is a poem that, to me, is about our planet. But it also is a poem that began. Poems always begin for any of us that are writers, and so many of us I know here tonight are. This one began with a sound, and I was thinking about how the sound it makes when everyone rolls out their recycling bins at the same time. And how you think, oh, it sounds like a train or thunder or something, and then you go, oh no, it's trash night. So that's how the poem sort of began, but of course that's not what the poem is about. Dead stars. Out here, there's a bowing that even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us, black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute it's almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash. The rolling containers, a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bin until you say, man, we should really learn some new constellations. And it's true. We keep forgetting about Antlia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerta, Hydra, Lyra, Lynx. But mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust, and I wish to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you, towards what's larger within us, toward how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What would happen if we stood up with our synapses and flesh and said, no, no to the rising tides, stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, the land? What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth, if we declared it a clean night, if we stopped being terrified, if we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out after all of this is over? I want to read this poem, and because of its title, I really wanted to wear a Wonder Woman t-shirt that I have. But I put it on, and it just looked like I was trying too hard to be cool. So, you know, I might wear it at some point, but I just want you to know that I did want to wear it for you. Wonder Woman. Standing at the swell of the muddy Mississippi after the urgent care doctor had just said, well, sometimes shit happens, I fell fast and hard for New Orleans all over again. Pain pills swirled in the purse along with a spell for later. It's taken a while for me to admit I am in a raging battle with my body. A spinal column 35 degrees bent, vertigo that comes and goes like a DC Comics villain nobody can kill. Invisible pain is both a blessing and a curse. You always look so happy, said a stranger once as I shifted to my good side, grinning. But that day, alone on the riverbank, brass blaring from a steamboat Natchez, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a girl, maybe half my age, dressed for no apparent reason as a Wonder Woman. She strutted by in all her strength and glory, invincible, eternal. And when I stood to clap, because who wouldn't have, she bowed and posed like she knew I needed a myth, a woman by a river, indestructible. Thank you. This is I think of this poem, this is in The Hurting Kind, this poem as the companion piece to some place like Montana, and it includes our friend Heather. So T, again, is Trish, and then H is Heather. And it's about friends. I always say that, you know, bad lovers get way too many poems. Like, they get way too many poems. They don't deserve those poems. So we need to write poems for our friends that are there for us during all of the bad lovers. So if you need a poetry prompt for tonight, it is poems for your friends. This is called Blowing on the Wheel. It's getting late. the lights grayish gold on the hillside, and I'm thinking of car rides from Brooklyn to the Cape, or up to Moon Mountain from the city, or out to Stockbridge that one winter with H and her sister and cousin, and how we called them the Stockbridges. And I accidentally said, "Have a Norman Mailer Christmas," and not a Norman Rockwell Christmas. And we laughed at how sad a Norman Mailer Christmas would be. And how another time we waited for tea to put our bags in the car, as if she was not just driving, but our driver. How after tea got a ticket on 6 East, she'd go the speed limit, but blow on the steering wheel like it was a sail and say, "Is the car even on?" The three of us always piling into the back seat of some cab and deciding what was next, which was never bed, because there was still so much to figure out. And how someone once asked H if we ever ran out of subjects to keep talking about, and of course we wouldn't. We won't. It's endless. Even this is endless. The sky darkening in the way that makes me wish we were all wandering right now around New York City somewhere, or at the Governor Bradford and not wandering at all, or just talking or not talking, or being happy or not unhappy. And this is my secret work, to be worthy of you both and this infinite discourse where everything is interesting because you point it out and say, "Isn't that interesting?" And how mostly we say, "Remember that time?" And we will nod because we do remember that time, except for the few times we've forgotten. Like the one time when H was trying to remind us of something, and when we asked her what, she said, "I don't know, but you were there, and I was there." And we were. I'll just read 2 more poems, and this poem is a poem that I wrote when, during the middle of the heart of the pandemic, I was in the middle of the heart. Interesting. I was using that time to kind of think about all the stories that people had told me that I needed to undo. And I remember being 8 years old, and this woman said to me, "I'm so sorry you're now from a broken home." My parents had just gotten divorced. And I remember thinking, I didn't feel like it was a broken home at all. In fact, my parents seemed a lot happier. And it stuck with me for a long time. And I think that this poem is still a response to that woman. Joint custody. Why did I never see it for what it was? Abundance. 2 families, 2 different kitchen tables, 2 sets of rules, 2 creeks, 2 highways, 2 step-parents with their fish tanks or 8-tracks or cigarette smoke or expertise in recipes or reading skills. I cannot reverse it. The record scratched and stopping to that original chaotic track. But let me say, I was taken back and forth on Sundays, and it was not easy, but I was loved each place. And so I have 2 brains now, 2 entirely different brains. The one that always misses where I'm not, and the one that is so relieved to finally be home. And I will close with this poem, which I wrote in March of 2020, around that time, in case you remember what was happening. And what happened was I was getting all these phone calls, and people were like, don't you think we need poetry now more than ever? And I was like, Also, like, fair housing and good health care, vaccine. And I kept trying to write poems, but I was really stuck. And I kept thinking about words I liked and musicality and images. And then, of course, what happened was I couldn't write the poems, but then the list that I was making in my head became the poem. And in many ways, this is the first poem that brought me back and reminded me that I was a poet. The end of poetry. Enough of osseous and chickadee and sunflower and snowshoes, maple and seeds, samara and shoot. Enough chiaroscuro, enough of thus and prophecy, and the stoic farmer and faith in our Father and 'tis of thee. Enough of bosom and bud, skin and God not forgetting, and star bodies and frozen birds. Enough of the will to go on and not go on, or how a certain light does a certain thing. Enough of the kneeling and the rising and the looking inward and the looking up. Enough of the gun, the drama, the acquaintance's suicide, the long-lost letter in the dresser. Enough of the longing and the ego and the obliteration of ego. Enough of the mother and the child and the father and the child. Enough of the pointing to the world, weary and desperate. Enough of the brutal and the border. Enough of, can you see me? Can you hear me? Enough, I am human. Enough, I am alone and I am desperate. Enough of the animal saving me. Enough of the high water. Enough sorrow. Enough of the air and its ease. I am asking you to touch me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada and Laura, for your funny, gorgeous, just incredible poems. I thought I'd kick off our post-reading conversation, if you'll indulge me, with kind of a big question. We'll see where it goes. At some point, I started collecting phrases whenever I noticed a poet claiming something about what the role or aim or job of a poet is. For example, Ilya Kaminsky has said the poet's role is to enliven the senses. Solmaz Sharif has said the poet's job is to agitate language. And Mary Oliver has said the poet's role is to pay attention. I wonder if either of you have any sort of working belief like this articulated for yourself, or an implicit one, perhaps, that you see enacted in your poems. In other words, how might you complete the sentence, the role of the poet is?
You want me to take that first? You want me to take that?
It's always hard with two other people because no one wants to be the
like,
first
you go
one to
first.
respond.
No, and especially with that question, we're like, no, you answer it.
It's big, yeah. It's a toughie.
Want you to take it.
Yeah. We're like, and would you, and what are your thoughts? I think that for me, one of the biggest things. I mean, I agree with both, everyone on that list, Solmaz and Ilya, and of course Mary Oliver. But I think that there's a big part of me that feels like every poem does a different thing, and it's not just about poetry as one thing, but every poem has its own ability to shift and change and move things. And so for me, it feels like the poem's job is just to turn us on and remind us that we are thinking and feeling human beings, and that's enough. Because one poem may make you grieve, and one poem may make you laugh, and one poem may do many, many things all in one poem. And so I think it's really just to remind us that we aren't supposed to live a life of numbness, that we are supposed to live a life of presence and awareness and feeling.
Amen. It's beautiful.
Okay, so I'm gonna just answer a different question, if that's okay.
Great. You're a professional. You've been a poet laureate too.
I do see it as related, but I guess I was thinking about like why I write poetry. Yeah. And I think I write it, and this is sort of building on what Ada said, is to sort of make a feeling sense of things that have happened to me. So I don't think my poems really make sense, but they kind of feel like they do. So, and I used to think of poetry oddly as an act of revenge. So this is a little bit.
The poet's role is to seek revenge.
I was like, don't wrong me. And so, but I also was thinking when Ada was talking, because she's a much better person, I was also thinking that maybe it's also like an act of like making amends. Because I also feel like when I'm writing and trying to make sense of things, that I'm like trying to make up to like my child self and to other people, and like and then I was also hoping that this does relate to your question, that maybe the reader will also have that experience of having a feeling sense. So thank you.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for indulging that tricky question. You answered gorgeously.
Yeah, it was really hard.
I know, I'm the worst. I'm terrible. This, impossible task of trying to articulate the role of the poet reminds me of how our ideas about what it is to be an artist change over time. It feels embarrassing to admit this now, but there was a time when I had this idea that to be an artist, you had to be like solitary and kind of messed up and miserable and starving. I really did believe this, like in my earlier 20s. And thank God that's not the case, Like, turns out being in community with other poets is everything. And being, living a healthy life is really sexy and great, and is great for writing. So I'm curious to know if there are any ideas of what it means to be an artist that you used to believe that you've let go of.
I mean, I think for me that, the idea of a suffering artist and the idea of imposter syndrome, all of those things I feel like are part of a system of oppression. And I just don't have any need of them anymore. Yeah. I think that we don't need those anymore. And I think the other part was that something terrible or significant had to happen in order for art to be made. And I think like the miraculous fact of being alive is enough to make art.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think I used to think that poetry had to be written in a certain kind of like elevated language too, and that like my like real life self had to be separate from my poet self. And also I didn't know how to like put humor in poetry, and that's really important to me. And so eventually I read enough that I thought, yeah, that's something you can do. And to me, like, the more like ordinary and relational it is, the more it has the power to like move me. And so what you were saying too, I often tell my students that I'm like, it doesn't have to be the most dramatic event. It could be a small event that they're writing about, that if you just describe it closely or push it through language closely enough, will reveal something. Yeah.
Laura, you've said before that time travel is why you write poetry. And Ada, it seems like your poetics might be driven in general by a desire to experience present or near present moments more fully. I'm hoping you both might be willing to talk a little bit about what poetry gives you in terms of negotiating your place in time.
That's great. Okay, so, my friend Aileen, who is probably here, interviewed me for the Inlander, and they asked me, they said, well, you know, is it hard for you to like always have the past with you in the present? And I was like, isn't that what it's like for everyone? And they said, no. And I was just floored. And then they kind of said it like it was a problem, like it was a burden. And I was like, actually, I mean, maybe I do have a problem, but I actually was like, I sort of like it, because I feel like every moment also has the layers of all the other moments. And having lived here most of my life, I'm always like around like all of my past. So it's like I'm inside the present, but it's like there's a little circle of the past around me. And I like poetry for many reasons, but I think time travel is one of them, because it's like a way to stitch together different moments and find their connections and make meaning. So I think that's how I feel about time and poetry. Thanks, yeah.
I love that. My answer is not that different. In fact, I had the same sort of experience where someone was like, you know, how come when you in your poems, you're present and then you go backwards and then you go, you know, all this stuff. And I said, oh, that's easy because time doesn't exist. Right. And everyone was like, what? I was like, yeah, time, because it, you know, doesn't exist. And they were like, no, it exists. I was like,
Don't tell me that.
I was like, I think that my poetics is a poetics of simultaneity. Like, I think that is something that it's constantly, everything is happening at once. And I think actually surrendering to that and being fully present does mean that you also are remembering, and that you're also, you know, like all of the times happening at once does actually deepen when you have a full sense of presence. Yeah.
I have this little quote by the poet and activist Audre Lorde taped up by my desk, and it says, "I am listening to what fear teaches." And when I was working on Judas Goat, I was thinking a lot about fear and trying to write into what scared me a lot. And I'm still really interested in what fear teaches, but I'm interested in kind of expanding my relationship to fear and courage when it comes to poems. What would you say the relationship is in your work of poetry to fear?
Yeah, I'm really, really good at fear. Okay, so I have a student who will go unnamed who comes into class every day, and I say, "How are you?" And they say, "I'm scared." And I love that. I just think that's so great. And I mean, not that the student is scared all the time, but that they admit that. So, and another thing that's coming to my mind is when I was a kid, I was always afraid of everything. And my mom gave me this book that was called Feel the Fear, But Do It Anyway. And I remember I yelled at her and I was like, feel the fear and don't do it. Like that. And so like for me, fear is like, it just haunts me. But like when I'm writing, because I'm like by myself, then I can like push through like things that are scary and try to create something that's beautiful. And then the scariest part is like this part, right? But like but so I feel like fear is like a motivator because I'm gonna feel it anyway. But if I'm writing, I can maybe transmute it into something. So, and then I was also thinking about, I'm teaching Mary Ruefle's Madness, Rack, and Honey right now, and she has this beautiful chapter on fear, and I won't be able to quote it that well, but she's talking about how like, in an emergency, a pilot can land a plane because that's what they're trained to do, right? In surgery, a doctor can save someone because that's what they're trained to do. And she said, poets, we're afraid. And we're trained to be afraid, and we can write a poem about it. And I was like, I love that, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, I think that whole, like, the idea of being scared of everything, I think it can be very true for many artists. But I also think that it's what makes us look deeper at the thing, right? Because then the questions come. So for me, my relationship to fear is the questions, why am I so scared of that? And then that's interesting to me. So then it kind of moves from fear to curiosity. And that to me is where I can write the poem from. Yeah.
In Edel Adnan's short letter to a young poet, she says, "You don't need to read too many books of poetry to come closer to the heart of poetry, but you need to love a few poets madly." Who are some poets whose work you would say you have loved madly, if there are any? And specifically, if there are any particular collections of theirs that call you back again and again?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many, and asking this question is hard because we're like, how much time do we have? Yeah, and I don't want to leave anyone out, but I'll just say that there's a few poems and books of poems that I return to over and over again, and one of them is Elizabeth Bishop's Geography 3, Audre Lorde's Collected, everything by Lucille Clifton, Larry Levis's Elegy, and it's interesting to me, but honestly, for a contemporary, I learned so much from the poet Natalie Diaz, and I think she's a dear friend, but Post-Colonial Love Poems really, really has changed me. I think it's an incredible, incredible book.
I think the book I return to the most is What the Living Do by Marie Howe. I find that book, I like books that are like a poem themselves, and so it's like in pieces it tells the story of her life. And I also had a pretty significant loss in my life, so it helps me process loss. And also it's just so beautifully and artistically put together. Like the ending is the title poem, and you think that it's done, and then you turn the page and there's a poem about her dog named Buddy, and it talks about Buddy coming to the door and not understanding that the person is gone. And it's just really like this beautiful last moment that you don't expect. So I love that book, and I don't know if this is the moment, but also I love you. I didn't really expect to confess that, but I really love your book, Bright Dead Things, and the poem Accident Report in the Tall, Tall Weeds. And I love it when you talk about the fabulous rotary phone. And so many of your poems really move me and inspire me. So, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Oh, that feels like the place to end, but to wrap up, I wanted to give you both the opportunity to share some advice with our audience. I know that can kind of be an annoying thing to be asked, but it also feels like an exciting opportunity with a big group of people. For anyone who wants to engage with poetry as a reader and or a writer in a deeper or more expansive way, what might you recommend? Maybe a piece of like very tangible advice and then something more general or philosophical in nature.
I mean, I think I would offer two things, and one of them is that to just write. I think that we sometimes get so scared. The biggest editor, right, is before the pen even reaches the page or the fingers reach the keyboard or your phone, however you write. And, you know, Robert Haas has that quote, you can't revise nothing. So, you need to actually just do it. And that Jane Smiley has the wonderful quote of, all the first draft has to do is exist. And so sometimes I think that we get so worked up about the preciousness of writing that we don't actually write. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other big part of it is that you don't have to be, and I've said this before a little bit, but you don't have to be a public poet. If you see poets and it's very public and that doesn't interest you, it is completely beautiful and wonderful and necessary to be a private poet and to write things just for yourselves or just for your friends or just for your family and publish at your own speed and do whatever you need to do to caretake yourself, because Lama Radowans always says that the goal is longevity, and so you want to make art that keeps you making art. Yeah.
Well, I'll just add to what Ada, my new best friend, just said. Which is that I think, well, you didn't actually agree to it, but I agree. Okay, but I was thinking you have to have, like, I loved what you said about you can be private, because the joy of it, like in the last day when I've been nervous to do this, I actually wrote a poem, which I can't believe I did, because I was like, I just need to remember like why I'm doing this, and I had an idea, so I just like started playing with it, and then I just kept going back and forth to it, and that part, like I feel like I'm totally not thinking about anything else when I'm writing the poem, and it's like who I am. And so I think everyone should do that, and even if you're not doing it publicly, like I just love what you said, just because the joy of puzzling things out and maybe arriving somewhere interesting is really beautiful. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Such an honor to get to do this event with you. Thank you all again for being here and being such a vibrant, wonderful audience. And thank you to Get Lit for everything you've done. This weekend is truly lit.
What an amazing night, right, Spokane? Another round of applause for the night's poets. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. So this wraps up our most beautiful evening to celebrate our 25th anniversary, but if you can believe it, we still have another amazing day for you tomorrow at the Montvale Event Center, so please make sure to come down and see us there. And we'll be closing out the festival with Jess Walter, Lena Crow, and Sharma Shields at the Spokane Public Library tomorrow night at 7. All right, well, thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you in the book signing line. Remember that we are requiring masks for that line, so make sure you mask up and get on out into the line. Thank you again for coming. Night.